Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Aging at Altitude series. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Lunchtime Conversations webinar. Today is our first one, and we are so excited that you are here with us. My name is Lindsay Haynes. I am the event manager with Prairie Mountain Media, and I will be moderating today's session. So our webinar format gives you the opportunity to ask any questions or send us any chats through your Zoom platform. So whether you're on a computer, a mobile device, or a tablet, if you just look at the bottom of your Zoom video screen, there will be a little box for Q&A or a little box for chat. So at any point today, if you have any questions or comments for us or our speaker, just feel free to type those in there. And then at the end of today's session, we will have a question and answer portion where we'll be able to answer any of the questions that come up. So our speaker will present about 30 to 40 minutes for our timeline, and then we'll have about 20 minutes for your questions. So that being said, today to kick off our first lunchtime conversation is Chelsea Walters. She is the board certified hearing instrument specialist and also the owner of Family Hearing with 3 locations in Boulder, Broomfield, and Lafayette, Colorado. We're really excited. She will be touching on how timing is everything, hearing, and how hearing keeps you in the moment. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Chelsea, and she will get us started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I am just going to share my screen. And I think I have to swap my settings there. And here we go. Does that look good, Lindsay?
It looks perfect.
Awesome. Oops. Actually, I need to change one more thing. Hold on. I need to make it good for my audio. Pardon me real quick, guys. Let's try that again. All right, here we go. Thanks for dealing with that technical difficulty. I'm not exactly sure how to be smooth yet on Zoom. I think I would have figured that out by now. But my name is Chelsea Walters. I am a board certified hearing instrument specialist and co-owner of Family Hearing, which is the longest serving and most awarded hearing practice in the region. I'm thrilled to be part of the Aging at Altitude conference yet again this year to discuss the subject of time. As we age, time becomes more precious, it moves faster, and savoring the moments that matter most becomes the most important thing. When we think of hearing, we think of it typically two-dimensionally as a function of pitch and volume. But time is the space in which those two factors reside. And even though it can be easy to forget about, we instinctively understand that when it comes to sound, time is essential. Think about it. Have you ever counted the seconds to determine how far away lightning was? 15 seconds, it's 3 miles away. 5 seconds, it's 1, and 0, take cover. Innately, we understand that the timing of sound is correlated with distance, but there's much more to it than that. So use your chat feature. Lindsay is going to help shout out the words that you associate with time. When you think of time, what words come to mind? Some words that come up for me when I was building this presentation were speed, efficiency, tempo, sequence, alarms, or aging. We're going to explore all of those things as we kind of uncovered the building blocks of sound, the art of hearing or capturing sound, how sound is processed by the brain, and of course, reintroducing sound, my favorite, amplification. To understand the basics require understanding what sound is. Sound is caused by a disturbance in the air that creates a pressure wave. This disturbance causes air particles to vibrate, which bump into other particles. Sound travels so far as those particles continue to interact. This activity has points of great pressure, where those particles are close together, and low pressure, where those particles are spread apart. This is illustrated by the basic sound wave you have on your screen in the peaks and the troughs. The peaks and the troughs, of course, dance across the axis of time. The apex of the pressure is called the amplitude, and that's what we associate with volume. The greater the amplitude, the louder the volume. So the greater the peak or the trough, the louder the volume in this case. The time it takes for a sound wave to go through one cycle of activity is called a period. And the distance a sound travels in one cycle of activity is called a wavelength. Here we have another confirmation that when it comes to sound, time and distance are linked. Frequency is the measurement of how fast a wave repeats itself. It's what we understand as pitch. Low pitches have a slow rate of change. They last for long periods of time and typically will travel farther than high frequencies. You can relate this to hearing somebody with bass speakers in their car. You can hear them coming from a long way just because of how strong low frequency energy is. On the opposite end of the spectrum, high frequencies change quickly over time. And as such, they use up their energy fast, lasting shorter periods and not traveling as far as low frequencies. You can equate this to listening to a whisper. The hushed nature of a voice is high frequency, and you have to lean in to really capture what's coming across because it doesn't travel as far. Sound, of course, is more complex than the simple pure tone sound waves that I was showing on the other screen. Typically, sound is a mixture of a lot of different patterns that get added or subtracted together to create its own form. So wave 1 plus wave 2 would equal something like this. It also doesn't travel in a straight line. Instead, it travels from all directions from its source, kind of emanating like a sphere of sound that radiates. All of this activity happens very quickly. Sound travels about 1,100 feet per second. So if you were to think about that traveling in a straight line, it would be the equivalent of about 3 football fields in 1 second. Our ears are the organs that capture these sound bombs. The pressure of sound is transduced by the ear into electrical energy that the brain then interprets. So hearing is the act of the ears picking up the sound and the brain decoding it. The arrangement of the ears on either side of the head is useful in the brain's analysis of what's coming through. This is in part because sound arrives at each ear at a different time. This variance in information helps us identify where a sound is coming from in space. Think about hearing an ambulance coming down the road. If it was coming from the right side, that sound would arrive at the right ear before it arrives at the left ear. It would also be louder on that side, telling you that it's coming from the right. Arrival times at each ear also help suppress echoes. An echo is just a series of time-delayed copies of the same sound. Many environments that we engage in are highly reverberant, like open floor plan houses, Chipotles, or auditoriums. But often we fail to hear the reverberance, and that's due to the precedence effect. Essentially, the brain prioritizes the first signal in a series of copies, and it ignores the rest, so long as it's within 40 milliseconds. The brain is interpreting not only the differences between what sound captures through the ears, but the differences in how sound itself changes over time. As time passes, sound varies in volume, pitch, and speed. These changes are referred to as the temporal envelope and fine structure. The temporal envelope is how much a sound changes over a period of time. How this sound would be heard in the span of 12 seconds would be very different when compared to being in the span of 1 second, even though the shape looks exactly the same. Zoom into the envelope, and the small details within are referred to as the temporal fine structure. The envelope and the fine structure provide minute variants in sound patterns that make a big impact on the feeling and the meaning of what we hear. For instance, these cues influence how we hear vowels and consonants, test versus chest, hear versus hair. Misidentification of a sound in a certain place is one of the most common consequences noticed with everyday hearing loss. These signals can also affect the style of a voice. Intonation is the rise or the fall of a sound that can completely change its meaning. These details can also tell you the emotional intent of the speaker. For instance, think of Sheldon apologizing in this scene.
Sheldon, you need to apologize to your brother.
I'm sorry?
Yes, like that, but nicer and that way.
I'm sorry with a question mark sounds much different than
I'm sorry. Thank you.
even though the same words were said by the exact same person, the changes in the voice made a complete difference in how it was interpreted. Intonation can also influence why the same language can feel totally different when it comes to accents.
Banana,
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 tomato,
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 water,
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 The rate of sound can also change a meaning. Does anybody have experience with records in the audience? I personally do, and have definitely on accident played a 33 at a 45 speed. And that completely will change not only the tempo, but the frequency and the feeling of the audio. I did want to record one of these myself, but my 2-year-old broke my record needle, so I couldn't record my own. So I found this on the internet to display this kind of example.
Hi, everyone. This is David Seville. Alvin, Simon, Theodore, and I'd like you to join us in singing the songs of Christmas. So let's all gather around the tree and have some fun. Ready? Here we go. Here comes Santa Claus, right down Santa Claus Lane. Vixen and all his reindeer pulling on the rein. Bells are ringing, children singing, all is merry and bright. Hang your stockings and say your prayers, 'cause Santa Claus comes tonight.
The subtitles got very interesting when they slowed that record down, but the chipmunks actually sounded normal when presented at a slower rate. Temporal impact is also affected by the summation properties of sound waves. Remember, we said that most sound is not simple. It's a combination of many sounds that get added and subtracted together. Their starting point or phase plays a role in this process. When the starting point is all the same, the additions and the subtractions of multiple waves can be pleasing. Think about a choir all singing the same note in unison. But many sound profiles are constructed of waves that have different starting points. They construct and deconstruct the total sound and add enough variance and start times, and this can start to feel discordant, like being in a restaurant background noise. These variants in sound over time are sensed by the ear. That is, the temporal fine structure and envelope are sensed by the ear, but interpreted by the brain as mood and meaning. And that moves us into how sound is processed by the brain. So on one hand, the processing of sound is a passive activity, just breaking down what's coming through the ears. On the other hand, the brain is also actively involved, dictating how it values what's flowing in. A mind that hears the same sounds repeatedly becomes rewired to improve the efficiency of responding to those sounds. That's what heavy and plasticity is. And this is why it's often easier to hear your spouse in a group of people. It's also what makes it difficult to understand unfamiliar accents. I can't tell you how much I talk about processing when I talk to people who are fans of Downton Abbey or British Masterpiece Theatre. This is also why the voice you came with at a party has a better chance at jumping forward against the din. The cocktail party effect is the ability to focus one's attention to a stimulus of choice and filter out the rest. This is also supported by some things we discussed earlier, echo suppression and arrival times at each ear. These three things play a role in our selective attention skills. Of course, selective attention does go both ways. I love this comic. But all of this processing happens so fast. But how fast is it really? Processing speed from the ear to the brain is a challenging event to measure. What can be measured is the reaction time to a sound. It takes a runner 150 milliseconds after the gun goes off to start the race. From that, we can infer that the brain processes more quickly, say around 50 milliseconds. That's very fast. And it's much faster than the time it takes for us to process visual information. How long do you think it would take you to find Waldo when looking at this picture? I personally cheated when I built this presentation. There he is. It takes a long time to find him, and that's what these books were made for passing the time. But with hearing, it happens almost instantly. Think about that time you lost your child while you were shopping. He or she thought it was super funny to hide in the clothes. Other shoppers were talking, shuffling their feet, shifting the hangers from one side of the rack to the other. And then you heard that giggle or that cry, and almost instantaneously you can react to change your course. This quick reaction to sound processing is what makes hearing such a great alarm system. Thunder, baby cries, your alarm clock. All of these sounds make us move rapidly, even if it is just to hit snooze. This is because the sense of hearing is in part designed to monitor changes in your environment over time. Incoming audio not only gets us moving, but it also ignites our emotions. Hearing a baby cry on a plane will make us tense, whereas hearing him laugh will make us happy. All of these feelings can be called forward instantaneously from what we hear. I always like to say that it's so cool how when it comes to our health, that everything is connected, but it's annoying too. When the brain loses audio information from the ears due to hearing loss, processing can be negatively effective if it's left untreated. Hearing loss, aging, and processing are all tied together. To understand how your hearing performs in this relationship, you need to have a hearing test. This will typically involve a consultation with a clinician who will ask you questions about your health and your hearing. They will put you in a sound booth to identify if there are any areas in your hearing that need a boost. Hearing loss is unique, and everybody requires a different enhancement depending on where their personal sound voids lie. A sound void is any moment that's lacking clarity. So when we talk about that graphically by looking at an audiogram, on the left side of the screen, we have low frequencies or deep frequencies, as it says here, that move forward into high frequencies on the right hand of the screen. Think of a piano keyboard across your screen. At the top end of your audiogram, you have quiet sounds that increase steadily down to loud sounds at the bottom of the audiogram. That yellow banana is the speech region where most of the energy of the speech sounds we hear every day fall. A hearing loss will intersect the speech region in various degrees. as is indicated by the lines that are intersecting the yellow on the screen. In most cases, a hearing loss doesn't mean that you can't hear. It means that you're missing out on pieces of the sound picture, and these lines can depict what that looks like graphically. But practically, it feels different. Can you read this sentence? It's challenging. What about this one? It's much easier to decipher what are you doing today with the bottom sentence because it has less blanks. The greater the hearing loss, the more blanks or sound voids there are, making it difficult for the brain to figure out what's coming through. In addition to mapping out the blanks in your hearing, professionals are also testing how well you understand sound in optimal audio conditions. This involves repeating back words that were said in quiet listening situations. Say the word knock, say the word keg, and you repeat those back, and your score determines how well you can hear in those optimal conditions. Some professionals will also take it a step further and test how well you understand in noise. This involves repeating back a sentence in the presence of background noise. You did this multiple times, and as you move forward, the background noise increases. It's a very interesting test. Aging affects many things going on in our lives, and difficulty hearing often comes with the territory. When it comes to hearing, aging processes can muddy up the spaces between sounds, making it difficult to discriminate between pitch and processing more slowly. This is true even when hearing is normal, that these aging changes can make an impact on how we hear. So what does it mean when the spaces between sounds become unclear? This is called temporal gap detection. And as we age, the ability to recognize the gaps diminishes. Think of the word cactus. There's a space between the syllables cac and tust. Diminished ability to notice these spaces means that the sound quality becomes less sharp. Aging also affects our ability to notice small changes in pitch over time. For instance, ba versus da has a tiny variation in frequency that the ear can pick up on. This means that the older we get, it becomes more difficult to distinguish between sounds that sound similar to each other, pill versus bill, gate versus cape. And this is true whether or not there's a hearing loss. Additionally, aging also slows down how quickly we can process what's coming through. This means that it takes more time to decode the sounds that are coming into the brain. It's also part of the reason why speaking at an easy rate is more successful in communication than speaking at a louder volume. You're helping the other person have time to compute what's coming through. The brain reorganizes itself subsequent to hearing loss. Essentially what this means is that rather than the brain relying on the auditory cortex to process what's coming in through the ears, the brain starts to leverage other resources like our visual centers or our deductive reasoning centers. An example that I'll frequently use in practice is think of that morning when your husband says, "Honey, would you like a cup of coffee?" Even though you missed out on that F sound, if it's 7:30 in the morning, you might infer that your husband was talking about coffee. If you can see the coffee pot, you might assume that the word was coffee. And if you can smell the coffee, you might know for sure that the word was coffee. But these are all examples of how the brain is using other resources to hear rather than the hearing sense itself. And even though this is really cool that the brain can react in that way, long-term it has a negative consequence. Untreated hearing loss has been correlated with an increased risk of dementia and a higher cognitive load. Essentially, the brain is working harder than it needs to hear. It should just be listening, not using all these other tools. Again, we run into another process that is reciprocal. Aging and hearing loss will change how we hear, but hearing loss left untreated can make an impact on how we age. That's the science about hearing loss and aging, but from my patient's perspective, it feels like they're missing out on moments. Every day, I meet people in practice who struggle communicating with their partner, or have difficulty participating in big gatherings like an Easter dinner. I'll never forget the story a friend told me once when her hearing aid died on Christmas morning. She realized that she had no batteries and she was headed to her mother-in-law's house, packing up the car, packing up the kid, and instantly she felt panicked and rushed and stressed. They stopped at every open Walgreens and CVS on their way to their mother-in-law's house and thankfully did find a pair of 312 batteries. But that panic and that stress that she underwent has always stuck with me, her fear of missing out on a moment. Other people will tell me it feels like a proverbial game of catch-up. They're always trying to best guess what sound fills in those voids, and that extra work that they're doing is literally exhausting or stressful. And many more feel like they've missed out on enough moments that they've lost out on time itself. Luckily, these moments can be regained with the introduction of hearing technology. It takes about 4 to 8 milliseconds for a hearing device to pick up, process, and then reproduce a sound. This adds just a small amount of time to the 50-ish milliseconds that it takes for a person to compute an incoming signal. Just like the design of the hearing system and sound itself, the mechanism in hearing devices also all tinker with time. Simply put, a hearing device gathers sound, alters it, and then reproduces it. If what's coming in through a hearing device is greater than the capacity of what that hearing device can transmit, it will make a change between the softer and the louder parts of what's coming through. This will distort the temporal envelope that we were talking about earlier, and at worst leads to peak clipping or distortion. Put simply, this leads to an unnatural sound quality or an unclear sound quality. The hallmark of modern hearing devices is the fact that they don't apply the same amount of volume to every sound that's coming in. Hearing devices change how much gain is applied depending on how loud an input is. What this means is that the amount of volume that's given to a whisper is greater than the amount of volume that's given to a gunshot. These adaptations to how volume is applied in a hearing device is referred to as compression. When hearing technology responds to an incoming sound, it's called the attack. And when it renormalizes following the attack, it's called the release. Both the attack and the release take time, and how much time is dependent on the listener's experience with the sound. Imagine this sound scene. You start unlocking an empty car. You're in the parking lot by yourself. The only thing you hear are the keys jingling, maybe the zipper of your purse. But for some reason, the car alarm goes off. At once, everything is extremely loud. This is when a hearing device would attack by reducing how much gain it was providing in the previous quiet scene. Everything is going to get turned down right now. Seconds later, you get the key out of the ignition. The alarm goes off. Silence. This is when the hearing device would release compression and restabilize back for the quiet scene. There are 2 types of compression, fast compression and slow, and both have different benefits based on the soundscape that you find yourself in. For sudden changes in volume, like a car alarm going off, a fast attack will quickly make the environment more comfortable or tolerable. But if the din of an environment rises slowly, maybe you're the first person at a party as people start to come in, a fast attack might chop the sound and reduce clarity. Where a fast attack can greatly distort the signal, slow attacks preserve the signal, leading to a more natural sound quality. It preserves those timing differences between your ears and the differences between speech and noise, making the wanted signal clearer and easier to understand. Phase cancellation is something you may have heard about if you enjoy noise canceling headphones. Essentially, phase cancellation is introducing a sound that starts and beats in the opposite of another. So this is putting the inverse phase in to cancel out a sound. Your headphones do this to reduce the noise, so you can only hear the audio that you're listening to, maybe your music or a podcast. And that works really successfully with a steady state noise, like being on an airplane where that hum is a constant. It's not going to work as well when the noise is changing all the time because it's always having to predict what the right wave is to input. Hearing devices employ this also when it comes to feedback. When hearing devices whistle, hearing aids recognize that and try to put in the opposite sound to cancel it out. Like the ears, hearing systems are also designed to notice differences in arrival times at either side of the head. Despite the differences in the signal on each side, both the devices will work together to enhance the speech signal over any unwanted noise or signal. Essentially, if there's noise on this side, but not on this side, the hearing devices are communicating together so that they know what's going on both sides to optimize the listening condition for you. The microphones on the hearing devices are also arranged intelligently. A sound at each one at a different time enables the hearing device to focus on the wanted signal. And of course, to make it even more complex, a hearing device will often sit on top of the ear and not inside of it, though there are some that sit inside of it. Incoming sounds will arrive both through the hearing device and through the ear itself. And again, we have a difference in arrival times when sound hits the eardrum. And if those are out of phase enough, what can lead to an artificial sound quality. Hearing devices of today that are fit properly can mitigate that effect. Also, hearing devices today are equipped with the ability to connect to your provider remotely. This can save users time by reducing trips to the office when safety, like COVID concerns, come up, or weather, like snowstorms, come up, and save rescheduling time or driving time. But what's also cool is that enables adjustments to be made in real time where the user is in their particular challenging environment that they're struggling with. Of course, this connection also takes time. We're going from provider to your smartphone to your hearing aid and back and forth. But the ability to do this is getting cooler all the time. And the latest buzz you might be hearing in the audio tech world has to do with artificial intelligence. Hearing devices are incorporating machine learning and deep neural networks in their quest to better predict how listeners want to hear. This enables hearing devices to react more quickly and accurately to enhance a particular soundscape, like a noisy environment. So, to sum it up, time is a building block of sound. It impacts the quality of a sound. It's a factor in how we process sound. It affects how we process. It's a factor in aging, and it can be manipulated by hearing devices. And of course, there are many arguments to be made why the time is now to treat a hearing loss. The average amount of time it takes someone with hearing loss to adopt technology is about 5 to 7 years. Even though that's the average, there are a lot of reasons why adopting technology sooner is beneficial. The 2020 Lancet review identified 12 modifiable risk factors for dementia that account for 40% of dementia worldwide. Hearing loss was identified as the largest modifiable risk factor when compared to traumatic brain injury, high blood pressure, smoking, isolation, and more. 2017 research from CU revealed that cortical activity changes as a result of untreated hearing loss. And that goes back to talking about rather than the energy being in the auditory cortex, the brain's also leveraging other resources in the brain. They also found that there was a correlation between brain activity that underwent fewer changes in response to a hearing loss being associated with better speech understanding. Essentially, by treating a hearing loss sooner, speech understanding was preserved. Last year, Dr. Sharma and her team at CU published another research study on how the brain changed as a result of having hearing devices properly fit by a professional. In it, they found that brain activity renormalized, increased speech understanding, cognition, and flexible thinking, and working memory. So always remember that every moment counts. The sounds that are important will always be special because they are temporary. Your baby's laugh, the frogs you heard on your hike at the Grand Canyon, a concert at Red Rocks. The sounds can't be repeated, and neither can the moments that they embody. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus said that we can never step in the same stream twice, because by definition, the stream is always changing. Sound is ephemeral in the same way. The instant it's expressed, it fades. I'm reminded of this all the time when I get to hang out with my 2-year-old best friend. Language is just exploding, and how he expresses himself today is completely different than how he expressed himself yesterday.
Who took the cookies from the cookie jar? Mommy took the cookies from the cookie jar. Who, me?
Yes, you.
Not me.
Who?
Who took the cookies from the cookie jar? Jasper took the cookies from the cookie jar.
Me?
Yes, you.
Not me.
Then who?
So whether you're appreciating your hearing sense for the first time or getting your hearing devices later than you expected, keep in mind that it's always the right time to be fully present in your moments. Time is always running out, but it's never too late to capture what you can. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. That was great. We hear about things that you can do to prevent hearing loss, ways to stay proactive, but I think to really put it into the perspective of what we miss out on or how it can, impact our lives in the way that you have shared, I think is just so important. And I'm so happy that you did. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we did have some questions come in during that time period, but I did want to take the opportunity really quick to remind everybody that if you have a question that you haven't had the opportunity to type out, you can either answer or put it into our question and answer portion, or you can just send us a chat. Both are going to be found on the bottom of your video screen on your Zoom. So I'll go ahead and get started with the first one that came in. I find that I miss 1 or 2 words occasionally. And I know you kind of mentioned that a little bit earlier. So what are the next steps as far as your family hearing practice goes? What do you recommend for somebody that's finally kind of realizing that it's starting to, they're starting to experience that?
Well, mishearing is definitely something that's common with everyone, hearing loss or not. Sometimes we just don't capture what's coming through. But if you are in your middle life, it's very important to get a baseline hearing screening. It should be part of your preventative medical routine, preventative medicine routine. So getting in and getting a hearing test, you might end up finding that you're actually within normal limits and you're overthinking it. We definitely have had those conversations before. You might be starting to show signs of a loss, but not be ready for amplification at this point. And it could be greater than what you expect, which is what we see very often, and a technology demonstration can be provided. Great. Better to know than to wait.
Absolutely. And then kind of just know your options from there.
Mm-hmm.
So we did have a question come in. Can hearing aids or the treatment for hearing loss help with tinnitus? Did I say that correctly? I always think I'm going to mess that word up.
You can say tinnitus or tinnitus. Everybody says something different, and that's totally fine. But hearing loss or tinnitus is often correlated with hearing loss. About 90% of people with tinnitus also have some form of hearing loss. And by treating the hearing loss, oftentimes the symptoms of the tinnitus can be reduced. For some people, that will mean just a lessening of the volume of tinnitus. For some people, that will mean not noticing the tinnitus. And for some people, they might need a little more help with that. And technology today does offer audio masking that will help give your brain something to focus on that's outside of the tinnitus. And most audiologists on any team should be well versed in being able to talk to a patient about those things and helping with them.
Right. Very comforting as well. Okay, so next question that came in from Sarah. How do I find a good audiologist for age-related hearing loss? Personally, I am 74 and have realized for some time my hearing is deteriorating.
I think the best thing in terms of finding a provider that is going to be compatible with you is to start reading reviews and doing research, thinking about how far do you want to drive, maybe shopping around and visiting with a few practices, walking in, getting an idea of what your first impression of the practice or the professionals on the team are like. Even the front office person is going to set the tone for what your experience at that practice is like. So trust your judgment, trust your reviews online, and trust your friends' experiences. Ask them what they have experienced out there.
Great. Okay, so our next question came in. I was told that I needed to buy 2 hearing devices, but in my discussion group, I see nobody in particular with a hearing device in both ears. Just because of the cost, would just having one hearing aid work rather than the 2 together?
If you have hearing loss in both ears, it's very important to have a hearing device in both ears. So there are people who only have hearing devices on one side, and typically those are going to be people who only have hearing loss on one side. Your brain sums the information it's getting from both eyes, and going back to some of the things I talked about in my presentation, those timing differences between your ears on either side of the head can help you hear better in background noise. I always like to say 1 + 1 is 4 in the hearing aid world, just because both of your ears are really needed to have an optimal experience.
Absolutely. And even those other, the seeing or the smells, I thought that was a really great representation as well. You can utilize those, but they aren't always available, right? So you do need to, in the end, be able to depend on your ears as well. So,
well, and on long term, utilizing those other skills shouldn't be what you're always doing. It's actually taxing the brain more than it should. So it's cool that your brain can leverage those skills, but it shouldn't be all the time.
Yeah, great point. So kind of piggybacking off of that question, so, the understanding of the need to preserve hearing is so important, but how can a person on a limited income afford, these hearing aids or this technology that's coming out that are more expensive per se? Do you, for example, accept, insurance? Does insurance ever cover your hearing aids specifically, or even just the visits that you need to do? Can you kind of elaborate a little bit just for at least family hearing?
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways to afford hearing devices, and they can be expensive. That said, there are tiers of technology, so you can reduce your expense on your own just by kind of maybe shopping at a mid-range device rather than a top-tiered device. Additionally, some insurances do contribute to your purchase, so they'll pay a portion of your investment, not the whole thing. Typically, some insurances do pay the whole thing, but that's not that common. Mm-hmm. There are also grant programs. So for people coming into the clinic who can't afford hearing devices or don't qualify for financing, where you can get an interest-free rate to buy hearing aids and pay it back over the course of a year or 18 months. If you don't qualify for those types of things, we can utilize the different resources in Boulder, Broomfield, Lafayette, Erie. There's great people out there who will help you qualify for a grant.
Awesome. That's so comforting too, as well. I know a lot of people, they won't even make that first step because the cost is such a frightening aspect of it. So that's great that Family Hearing in particular has so many options for people. Okay, let me just double check. I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody's questions here. So we did have a question that came in. Do hearing aids affect people who suffer from benign positional vertigo?
Oh, that's a great question. We refer out for people who have BPPV to different professionals, our community, physical therapists and ear, nose, and throat specialists. I don't think that they would actually help with BPPV. I think you need to get a different treatment for a positional kind of vertigo.
Okay, great.
After that's fixed, we can help with hearing devices.
Excellent, right? So somebody had just mentioned kind of a comment from her mother does not wear hearing aids, doesn't like to wear them. So how long would it take her to acclimate to them, especially since, she's kind of in her mid 90s as well. So I know that sometimes new things or the, experience of regaining your hearing can also be, taxing.
Absolutely. It's definitely a lot to get used to. I often will equate a first-time hearing aid user getting amplification to turning on the lights at 4 a.m. It's really bright and it takes a little bit of time to adapt to that sense being overloaded. But honestly, most people adapt quicker than we'd give them credit for, 90-year-olds included. I mean, I have 95-year-olds who are connected to all kinds of different gadgets with their hearing devices. So adaptation happens really quickly. And as to how long it would take for her, my questions would really be, why is she not wearing them in the first place? Are they not comfortable? Are they hard to use? Are they difficult to get into her ear? And those answers would probably lead us to making the fit of the next one, whether it be physically or sound quality wise, more acceptable to a point where she wants to use them.
Great. Awesome. So kind of going off of that question as well, as far as the fitting and just the different types of hearing devices that you guys offer. So you mentioned even in your story that the woman who was on Christmas morning, ran out of her battery, scrambling kind of. Are there hearing devices that you offer that are rechargeable? Is that kind of technology out there yet? Are there, other options as far as rather than just your typical what everybody knows as the hearing aid with the battery replacement?
There are a ton of options out there, and that's part of the reason why when you meet with a professional, they're going to do an intake where they ask you a lot of questions to determine what's important to you. Rechargeability in the last year and a half has been amazing.
Yeah, not sure.
Not so much in years previous. There were rechargeable options, but there were failure points or the batteries didn't last that long. And that's really not true today. Rechargeability is really solid. And I will tell you that most of our clients are opting for rechargeable options now. But there are some people who still like their batteries. People with a very significant hearing loss don't like the idea that if their hearing aid dies and they're in a moment where they need to hear and it goes dead, that they don't have control over that situation. They actually have to plug the device in. And somebody on my team even still likes batteries, even though she's young. And, I would assume that she would be a rechargeable fan. So everybody's different and there's something for everybody.
That's awesome. That's so great. Let me just make sure here. Oh, yes. So even on your website and other quizzes or online tests that are out there, we see that there are quizzes you can take, online hearing tests or anything like that. How did those differ from when you actually make an appointment and you're physically meeting with somebody in your offices or with your practice, for example?
So an online hearing test is a really useful screening tool. It's not a calibrated test. If you're using speakers or equipment that's uncalibrated, that test is only as good as that equipment. And when you go into an actual office environment where you're in a booth, all of that equipment is standardized and calibrated so that we're actually getting really accurate results. When you do an online hearing test, it'll tell you whether you pass or you fail. Do you have a hearing loss or not? And usually those aren't just going to be like press when you hear the beep. It's going to be a combination of different sound types of tests and answering questions for how well do you hear in background noise? You ask people to repeat a lot. And the mixture of those survey results with those sound results will decide whether or not to refer you. So they're a great starting point. But if you want to get an accurate kind of result, you need to get a hearing test with a professional.
Great. And with the pandemic in the last year and a half as well, are those offered in any way in an at-home version, or would it be more in an office setting?
So that's a great question. We do offer house calls and have for a very long time. We've been around since 1963. And doing house calls has definitely been part of our services, whether that be in a person's home or at like a facility, like a senior living facility or a senior center. So depending on your comfort level, we can certainly meet you where you're at. Going back to those COVID things, I think people are feeling more safe, and we can absolutely feel that in the last month as vaccinations rise. But there are still some people that aren't comfortable coming into the office. So we also offer curbside appointments, in addition to those house call appointments where you can drive up and we'll take care of your needs while you wait in your car with minimal human interaction.
Great. And so one more question that kind of piggybacks off of that as well. So is there any kind of virtual, you kind of mentioned it in your presentation already, but the virtual aspect of it, even just the pairing of the hearing aids or anything like that, can you elaborate just for family hearing specifically a little bit?
You mean when talking about remote care?
Oh, yes, remote care. Yes.
Yeah. So remote care, that would have to be set up by the professional in most cases. And this is true of not just my practice, but most of them. Not all practices offer remote care. So you definitely want to call and find out who is using it. But most of those will have a connection to your cell phone. And then you will connect to your provider with your cell phone. And the professional just has to kind of enable something in the device and make that initial connection for you. Once you do that, it's really easy.
Great. We did have another question that popped in. When you buy a new hearing aid, do you have the ability to kind of like try it out for 30 days or anything, have them adjusted, and if it's just not working out, even return them even after they were uniquely made?
Yes. So every hearing device that you get, no matter where you get it from, should have a trial period. You'll pay for the hearing devices up front, and within that time period, you will have a time period where you can return it. The state of Colorado requires that it be 30 days, and different practices will offer different lengths of time. Our practice offers 75 days where you can return it. And if you're not happy with it, despite any changes we've made, even if it was customized for your ear specifically, no hard feelings.
Great. And then with just the multiple advertisements that, are getting pushed to people and different platforms as well, some people can kind of say that with modern technology, a $200 hearing aid is just as good as like a $2,000 hearing aid. I mean, how true really are comments that are like that so that people can, kind of judge accordingly?
I think it's hard as a consumer when you're looking up information to make sense of what's advertising and what's actually information.
Mhm.
So a $200 hearing aid is going to be like an amplifier. It's not going to be fit to your hearing loss. It's going to offer kind of a blanket amplification pattern that might overfit certain areas of your hearing or underfit certain areas of your hearing because it's not customized for your particular prescription. Whereas a hearing device, you're not just getting I guess going back, also, you're not getting any professional care with it. You're opening up the box, you're figuring out how to put it in your ear yourself, you're putting on different tips yourself, and you're trying to figure out what's best for you based on trial and error. When you get a hearing device, it is more expensive, but that's because it's tailored to your hearing loss and you have a professional guiding you through every step of the way. When you have a challenge, they're fixing it for you. They're connecting it to your smartphone. They're enabling remote care. So it's not that $200 technology can't help certain people. Think about cheaters when you go to Walgreens and you need some eyeglasses to help you read. My dad used those so long as his arm could reach out before he actually finally went and got his glasses. Mm-hmm. You can definitely do the same thing with hearing devices, but for most people, hearing is really sensitive. And when it doesn't sound right, it changes the tone of your life. And that's why hearing devices that are professionally fit have better outcomes.
Great. And so then we had a question, can my family practice doctor test my hearing? And I think that just kind of, I know you've touched on it a little bit, but just to be clear.
Well, family practice doctors can screen hearing. So they're not going to really print out a hearing test. Some family practice doctors might have an audiologist on staff that can do a full hearing test. Mm-hmm. But most places like that are going to screen hearing. Not all family doctors screen hearing, but there are definitely some that do, which is awesome because there are a lot of correlations between hearing health and other health things that go on in your body, like increased cardiovascular stress, high blood pressure. And so having your doctor care about hearing health and prioritize it is awesome.
I also wanted to circle back, to the portion of just staying in the moment, with understanding the different types of hearing loss and then just kind of helping, like you said, live your life and, timing is everything and so important. So how can family members, how can friends, how can we ensure if somebody in our family or, friend group are experiencing hearing loss, like what are some tips that you have for us? That way we can ensure that, that person is also able to easily stay in the moment.
I think perspective is really important because you might be able to see how they're hearing from the outside in, but they can only experience it from the inside out. And hearing loss doesn't happen overnight. If you started your day with normal hearing, went to bed and woke up with hearing loss, you'd be taking care of it immediately. But because it happens gradually, it can be really difficult to notice hearing loss coming on, and especially for the person that's hearing it from the inside out. So not just not taking a negative approach like you never hear and being naggy about it, but just saying you should get a hearing screening. You should go just see a baseline and see where it's at. Most places will offer a screening at no charge just to kind of get people in the door. Some people don't want to come in the door. That's like making it too real for them. And
Right.
so finding screening events that are outside of the office, kind of like taking away that white lab coat fear, and getting a screening that way or an online screening can be a really good thing. Once they're at the point where they're ready to actually discuss amplification, doing a demonstration should also be no charge in most offices, like getting your hearing test done and then afterwards having a set of hearing devices programmed for you to just have a conversation in. You can't know what you're missing until you're hearing it.
Absolutely. Well, great. Well, I think we're super close to our hour. Thank you, everybody, for your great questions. And thank you so much, Chelsea, for your awesome presentation.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, if there's anything for the audience that we missed or that I missed in your questions, Chelsea's information is going to be on our website, dailycamera.com/aging. You can visit their website at Family Hearing, or we also are recording this webinar today. So this will be recorded and posted on our website. So if you know of anybody that would benefit from this awesome presentation, or if there's somebody that missed the presentation today that you would want to send it to, you can absolutely point them there. We'll have it posted by the beginning of the day tomorrow. So that being said, join us. We've got other webinars this week going on and into the next couple weeks through the month of April. They'll always be 12 o'clock until 1 o'clock. And yeah, we are looking forward to seeing you guys soon. Thank you again, Chelsea, so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.